Welcome to the Bryce Eddy Show. So today we are going to be doing a little news update. We're going to talk about some things that are on our hearts and minds with Siaka Massaquoi. How are you, brother?
What's up, Bryce? I'm doing well, man. Doing well. Excited to be here as always.
Yeah, well, hey, I wanna talk about something that we might both be able to get a laugh out of. So,
All right.
um, one of those woke pastors who likes to weigh in on things, and now I predicted that these dudes were going to start with the like love your neighbor. How can you really vote for Trump? How can you this? How can you close the borders? Do all that stuff. And then they were gonna, as it approached the election, they were gonna be like, that's why I'm voting for Harris Wall. Okay. So that, as predicted, has happened. They've come out and I just don't see how I can only vote for them. It's like, dude, we knew that that's who you were this whole entire
Yeah.
time. You were playing like you're just this Jesus loving person and are so concerned with what you see in Trump, that you're just going to urge Christians to recognize the evil that's in him, when the truth is you're an effing communist and decided that Jesus was too. And so now you are going to go all in, and admit what you've been doing this whole entire time. So this dude puts this thing about diabetes, about insulin, insulin's this, and I want my neighbors to be able to afford it, right? So, and I probably should have had the full thing that he put. Well, I love to irritate these folks because for whatever reasons, the diabetics have made having diabetes so much a part of their identity. Type 1, type 2, and I get it, and I have great compassion for people, especially type 1. But you got to
Right.
ask yourself, and I did a whole podcast about this. Why has it gone from being a very rare disease, type 1 we're talking about, right? Or childhood onset or any of that stuff. Why has it been so rare to now being such a massive thing in our society? We know that type 2, we're being poisoned by our food industry. They've made all these foods addictive. They've made everything so attractive on that side that we're digging our graves with our spoons, right?
Right. Right.
So type 2 is a kind of a different thing. But I had a pharmacist on, Sean Needleman. We or Needham. Sorry, Sean. Um, anyway, but I had him on. He's a pharmacist, who really is a responsible guy, a health guy. Understands the need for medicine, but he's not a shill for big pharma and things like that. And we had a whole podcast discussion that the people who listen to it will remember, about diabetes, including his type 1 diabetic son, and
Mhm.
how diet can mitigate and extend and improve the efficacy of insulin. And
Right.
also, oh, by the way, insulin is fundamentally cheap, but the pharmaceutical companies continue to change patents and continue to do things to create these designer, insulin drugs that then they get to charge the insurance carriers, a bazillion dollars. They then get to fleece the American public, and then it becomes a political talking point
Right.
that they include in the Donald Trump and Joe Biden war of who's capping the price of insulin, at $35 and things like that. Now, when you look at the list of the drugs and you look at all this stuff, yes, there are ones that could cost you $1,000 a month, but by and large, we're talking, certainly less than your cell phone payment. And if you, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, have type 1 diabetes and you got, afflicted with that, we all have afflictions, we all have things that we have to deal with in life, and you got to pay the equivalent of a cell phone bill every month to stay alive, and people are like, hey, we have to pay money to stay alive. You have to pay money to eat. And if you don't eat, stay alive. You have to drink water. If you don't drink water, you're not going to stay alive. But I just post simply that, hey, insulin is actually not that expensive, right? It's actually cheap. You guys want the designer versions. And you guys have made this a politicized thing. This has been politicized by pharma, politicians, and all the BS surrounding it to use it as a tool against whatever political power is in, right? You cannot believe the amount of hatred I got,
Oh, wow.
folks. To where, number one, their reading comprehension isn't great because they're like, without insulin, I'll die. I said, I'm not saying you don't need insulin.
Wow.
Just saying that dramatically improving your diet will reduce the symptoms and help you to control the amount that you need and when you need it and all those sort of things, which the diabetics in my family agree with. Sean on our podcast went in great detail about his son, went in great detail about the actual price of insulins and all that sort of stuff. But you would be blown away as to the losing of the minds. And also, by the way, how many of these diabetics, adopt it as like a major identity issue, not just, hey, I've
Mhm.
got this, thing that I got to deal with in life, but it is a major part of their identity. And then how many of them, if you looked at the ones that were trying to excoriate me for suggesting that they could have better diets, how many of them were left wing, Ukraine supporters, I mean, it seemed like they were all that. So anyway,
Well,
I just bring it up because I can't believe, how stupidly wild that one went, when all I'm saying is, you'll get better result from your insulin and from all that you have to do if you control your diet.
Well, when you talked about how everyone is like in a group now, it's like even that has become a group. Like you pointed out that we've been getting poisoned for a long time, and I watched this "Enough Is Enough" video by RFK Jr.
Mhm.
I think it's about a 5 minute video, so if anyone wants to see it, you just look up "Enough Is Enough." And just alone since 1990, they've been putting coal tar in most of our food. So you see, and I know they also switched from salt in a lot of food to sugar, which is the most addicting, substance on the planet. So we see that happen to see them, get to a point where, like we said, our food is killing us. And instead of always of looking at the core of the problem, we have a society now that wants to look at the surface of the problem and then become the identity of the surface of the problem. And so many people, like you said, if you're sitting there as a Christian saying, well, it's because of insulin is why I'm going to vote for this guy over this guy, then you're throwing away or you're sacrificing, babies at the end of the day for cheaper insulin. When at the very least, Trump in office gets more people with more money left in their pocket. So even if insulin cost is going higher, you have more money, so you don't have to worry as much. I would easily sacrifice that idea to save a baby's life. So
Yeah.
they're not seeing that, they're switching it, going the other way around. So when they talk about, well, I can't vote for Trump because of, and that's something we talked about when we did our debate with the pro life Spider Man. It's like it's what is going to advance the Christian agenda.
Yeah.
And look, if you want to take a protest vote or non-vote because the person didn't go as far as you want them to go, then I believe you're building a harder fight at home than you could have if you go out and support someone that is pushing the agenda forward, as opposed to someone who is pushing the flesh forward or pushing like their one issue that they go, okay, well, this is the thing. But then they miss out on the fact that it was Trump's administration that helped lower prescription drugs in the first place by opening up where we could get them from. And there's also opportunities like, and I was just looking this up. Good RX is a subscription service where you pay like 10-15 bucks a month and you get up to 47% off your prescriptions. I had to do it for my eczema, so
Yeah.
I was only paying like 5-6 bucks, where 5 or 10 years ago I was paying around $300 for a little tube like this. So it's just to hear the way that guy presented. And I know from the health standpoint, an actor buddy of mine, he actually had type 1 diabetes, and he ate well, he worked out all the time, so much so that when the last visit that I remember him going to, the doctor was like, man, your levels are lower than those who are healthy and don't have diabetes. companies.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really about taking a responsibility that we're seeing groups not want to take. And like you said, he already wanted to vote for the Democrats. He's just trying to find an emotional reason to pull everybody else over so he can in a sense justify where he's at and what he's compromising. And this is just what you see these pastors do all the time. Like it's not wrong to want, the prosperity of gospel, right? It's not wrong to want nice things. And God gave me this Cadillac so that you can see where he can do for you. Like it's no different from that. They just found a different type of prosperity to preach about as opposed to just the gospel. It's really
Yeah,
sad.
no, it's again, man, these dudes, these woke pastor types are Christian for a reason, and it's
Yeah.
not it's not Christianity. It's
No.
they're that's not what they're pushing. And by the way, that's taking the Lord's name in vain. If you're going to do evil in His name, that's the
Mhm.
unforgivable sin. And these folks are pushing, what will cause, because communism will cause the deaths of hundreds of millions of people if
Right.
it's given its full form here in the United States. It'll kill babies and adults, and these folks are trying to pretend that God was anti-liberty and anti-commerce and anti-free markets and all of those sort of things, and he was a pro-communism, and Jesus was a socialist. But those folks are wicked, and they're playing this game, and it's being revealed. I mean, we're seeing the pieces, we're seeing it laid out before us, and that brings me to something else that I was sent.
Can I say one point really
Oh
quick
yeah,
on
yeah,
that
yeah.
last
Go
part?
for it.
So it made me think about, I'm reading in Chronicles right now, and I just read how David was offered three choices from the Lord to repent for one of his deeds of stumbling, and he was like either three it was 3 days of famine, 3 months in your enemy's hands, or no, 3 years of famine, 3 months in the enemy's hands, for 3 days in mine. And he chose God because he was like, oh, God's more merciful. I don't want to be in man's
Mm.
hand. That's crazy. And then as he chose God, God came down with plagues. Then him and the elders were on top of the mountain looking at Jerusalem and saw the angel of the Lord with the sword, standing between heaven and earth. And it makes me think, when you tell me these stories about these pastors and what Jesus said about those that have been given authority and they misuse it, their judgment will be even that much harsher. And I'm like, man, for someone who loved God and God loved him, his punishment to what David did to the people was so like gloriously, fantastically terrible, if you will. And I'm like, when you tell me that about a pastor who's siding with communism in this way, even if, let's just say, to be the most gracious, he really does believe it's the insulin. Let's just say that, like, he really, like, it's about the insulin. I'll bypass all the other stuff. It's like the level that's coming after you, that you're gonna be judged in. That scares the crap out of me, man. Like, you could play around like that you would go and knowing what you're doing, at the very least, just keep your mouth shut. But if you're doing that, man, his judgment, man.
Yeah,
Whew.
no, it's going to be rough on these folks, and it's going to be interesting. But yeah, I think that the truth is that all of us, when we're talking about these issues and these items that they've politicized like this, they should mostly be things that we join in, because certainly the pharmaceutical companies have abused us.
Of course.
There's a game perpetrated and played by the big corporate oligarchs on the American population in order to keep us sick, in order to keep us unhealthy, and spending money in their industries. And that's never, I think, been more clear than now. If you open your eyes and you just read what they're doing, watch what they're doing, watch what they did over the
Yep.
years, watch what Monsanto does to a farmer who's, when their seeds blow into his land, and all that stuff is just unconscionable, and we got to get these poisoners out. I mean, what they are doing to us with seed oils and other just poisonous materials in our food and in our water and everything else. I mean,
Yes.
it's great wickedness. So I think there's going to be judgment on all these folks, including the Christians that work for these companies that say that they love the Lord, and yet they're messing with His creation in ways that's to our detriment, and they know that
Mhm.
that's what they're doing, but they're doing it for the dollar.
Yeah, that's amen. Amen.
So I got sent to me from essentially a whistleblower.
Uh-oh.
Documents that are being disseminated as a briefing for the um, all of the agencies coming up, the federal agencies in regards to what they believe the domestic extremists that they are keeping their eyes on. And
Wow.
when you read this thing, you read how nakedly politically one-sided it is, because they mention all the dangers that are coming up after the election and all the things that they're concerned about. There's two things that would bother you about this is as they itemize these things and reveal these things, it is very clear that they have great confidence in a Kamala Harris victory, and it's unsettling.
Wow.
It makes you a little sick to your stomach, because we know that the intelligence services have done these types of revolutions. They have done these types of coups against the democratic groups of people around the world in order to install the leaders that they prefer. They have done
Mhm.
all kinds of things in order to create chaos, confusion, fraud, abuse of the system. And wow, their level of confidence in this briefing was really disheartening.
Wow.
And in it also, they recount throughout the whole thing, basically that we're going to have January 6th on steroids. Well, remember what they did to all the J6ers, including
Right.
the grandmas and all that stuff, that step foot or the Siaka Massaquas, just a poor
Right.
black boy that walked,
just, try-
took a
just
picture.
trying just trying to exercise my First Amendment, right?
Yeah,
Simple
left
stuff.
the house of
Simple
the
stuff.
people. You
Yeah.
know, let's see what this is about.
Right.
What they've done to everybody, they plan to do to everybody again, and they would
Mhm.
like nothing more. The tenor of this thing is be prepared and be ready to take care of this, and take care of these people.
Wow.
It was really, really disturbing on many levels. They didn't mention any possibility of violence the other way. They didn't mention any acts of violence on against the Republicans or the MAGA crowd or the Trump supporters. They
Huh.
uh, they only mentioned it as a violent reaction to us losing. And this thing was long. It wasn't short.
It wasn't like, hey, this is just a thought exercise. This is
Hey guys, be aware of these sort of things. Here might be some areas of potential concern. It's not like
Mhm.
that, because when they do something like that, it's more of an even thing. But you can tell how politicized these agencies are and how much they've lost their way. And it's pretty
You know,
disturbing.
I was I texting back and forth with this former FBI guy, and he's joking, he's seriously joking about having all the guns ready, all the backup stuff ready for what happened. He goes, for when they install her, and he's and I met him in person, and he's like an interesting cat where like he could be it could be dry humor or just the truth at the same time, like
Right.
and so he said that, he texted that to me, and we'll talk about polls later and all that stuff and kind of what's going on. And I keep thinking to myself in the back of my mind, Bryce, Shakespeare said all the world's a stage, and everything looks so set up a lot of times in certain ways. The organization of it, the coordination of certain things, like how do we have all these marches ready the next like 3 days after Trump is elected in all major cities across the world like that? How do we have BLM ready to go? Everyone's saying holding the George Floyd sign in Europe. You're like, what? Well, how did this happen, right?
Yep.
And the I go back to Charles Schwab being like, they're gonna by 2030, people aren't going to own anything and they'll be happy. But he also said something in there where he goes, in that time, people are going to get really upset. We're just going to have to work through it. And I'm thinking to myself, and I said this to Shar the other day now, and I believe, I believe in my core that Trump's going to win this election. But I stop and thought, and I turn to her and I go, what would upset Americans more than feeling the momentum of what's happening right now,
Hmm.
and then just pulling the rug completely from under people? Because and what they've done in this way. If I'm thinking of, I'm on the other side, kind of plotting and planning, how do I find my enemies? Almost like the opposite of draining the swamp that Trump did, because it revealed so many different people. How do I find my enemies? I get a populist that will get everyone riled up to be a part of them. People start to join forces. Then I also find the people within my own side, your RFK Juniors, your Elon Musk at one time, your Tulsi Gabbard, and so on. Then I'm able to find those people, and now they're highlighted. Now I know I can see who I'm looking for, pull the rug out under, finish January 6th stuff, and then now start moving on people because I've been paying attention to what they've been posting during this type of season that gets more heated than the average season. So if I was on the other side watching, I go, how can I get people riled up? How can I also identify my enemies like they do in 1984? And I see them, because I watched Kamala Harris speak and I watch how they're putting her out there and I watch what she's doing. It literally sounds like the TV show Veep with Julia Louis Dreyfus. And I know we can all kind of chuckle at it, but there's so many things they've done, from Star Trek and the flip phone that they were showing us is coming, to Iron Man. And we know the exoskeleton suits are out there in the military, to robotic delivery, objects. There's that one little piece out there that's just in the back going, they might be setting up the great rug pull here, when everyone and their mom can know, but those that the non the people who didn't stand up during COVID, we know that they don't have to worry about them. They got to worry about those who stood up, those who went to J6, those who now are changed their mind and are going over to the other side. It's like, oh, now we know every single person, and if they're the ones controlling the count, that's the only issue that I really have. Not as much the numbers, and we still need to come out, but more who's controlling the count, and are they going to let it be a free and fair election? And I mean,
That's right.
it's like Elon said, it's the most important election of our lifetime, and if we don't win this one, I believe he's right. I don't think we'll have a true election ever again. The Democrats already started in their own party when they just took one guy out and then placed someone in. They showed us what they were willing to do. That's
Yeah.
an example for the country.
No, no, that's exactly right, and that's my concern. I do not think he's wrong, and which is why I'm so disgusted. Like, Ben Ziesloft, who I've had on the show before, and he seems like a nice enough guy when you talk to him, and he seems a sincere enough guy. But he believes that right now he's going to force Trump to come out and say, you know. We're gonna create a federal ban against abortion. You're
Yeah.
not getting that at this point. Even if let's say Trump is just purely politically pragmatic and does not care really much about abortion. Maybe he's like half the church people, where, well, up to a certain point, okay, whatever. And and of course he's paid for, I think that's public and not just speculation, that he's paid for abortion before in his past. I mean, all of those sort of things. So yeah, okay, terrible point of view, right? I totally disagree. We can influence him in his administration far better than we can influence a Kamala Harris.
Oh yeah.
And Pastor Doug Wilson, and I think he said it brilliantly, because I totally agree with this sentiment. We are in the semifinals right now.
Mhm.
It is us against the Marxists, and that's Trump versus the Marxists. Okay, we got to win that one. We have to defeat the Marxists in this round, or we will not be playing again in 4 years.
Yeah.
We will not be in the semifinals again.
Right.
It will just be extreme versus extreme, folks, and they'll have a lock on it. Or it'll be the controlled opposition, the rhinos,
Yes.
people who are, maybe they're more fiscally conservative than the next guy, but certainly not moral actors. And at the end of the day, they're virtually the same people. That's who we will be running against next time. So, this is the semifinals. The finals will be us as believers, right? Against the rhinos and against the softened GOP and the
Hmm.
compromised folks and against the Trump administration. It'll be us wresting that control. It'll be
Hmm.
us doing what we can to have a true Christian revival in this nation. That's what this game is about, which is why I am willing to vote for Trump. And I do think he's the right one for us for this phase, for the semifinals,
Right.
right? Um, we need him.
100%. Yeah.
And Ben and those guys are being turds. You heard me, Ben. Because he's posting which is the lesser of two evils here, vote Baal or vote Moloch. He keeps like doing that comparison as if what we're, I mean, those are demon princes, right?
Yeah.
It's not Donald Trump as demon prince versus Kamala Harris as a demon prince. It is the Marxists against someone that may help us defeat them.
At the very least, against the American people.
Yeah,
And the core of what an American is one that is towards the Lord, not away from the Lord. So just the
yeah,
core and the belief of it. So
that's right.
I'm just really, I get really disappointed with, hearing stuff like that because, I remember being in my 20s and we didn't want to make it all about a youth thing, but it's so clear when you get older, you get perspective. You get children, you get a whole different level of perspective. And he's a young kid with no kids himself, and he can't see the forest for the tree.
Well,
And it's like there's
Ben,
so many
yeah,
other things happen.
I'm not sure about Ben. Ben Ziesloft might have children, but Mason, who we had talked
Or
about,
Mason, yeah,
yeah, Mason. That's a different story, and I appreciate people who are so rock and locked in on their principles and values and all of that, and are uncompromising, and all that. I mean, hey, that's who we all should be, but we have different calculations to make, and I want
yes,
to win. Right. And
yes,
you can be that uncompromising guy, but recognize in order for you to get to a point of victory, don't just uncompromise yourself, into oblivion, or into utter complete defeat, because it's not compromising to play the long game.
yeah. No, not at all. It's strategic. We talked about that lack of strategery, if you will,
Yeah.
and it's funny though because as you're saying, like, yeah, I'm not against them like holding on to, but I'm reading right now for a discipleship class, 21 irrefutable points for to make a leader. I forget the full name of
Yeah.
it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. John Maxwell,
And
21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
laws of leadership. That's right. It's alliteration. And one of them in there is talking about how, of course, the leader doesn't know everything, and have the ability to motivate people, but in a way where you can get the best around you. And it's really kind of when you see, and again, I even take these stances on certain things, and I believe it's a calculation because it can still win the most people over to the side that you may want them, because it is about some form of influence. You're trying to influence people and shift their thinking about it. But one of the things is you have to see the lay of the land and be able to, one of the things called navigation, I think it was number 4, and it's like you have to start to navigators have foresight, and they take time to read the tea leaves. And so you got to give yourself a second to go, okay, where's the wind blowing? Okay, it's blowing in a direction where for the first time in most people's lifetime, they have a chance to then take abortion back to the States and affect even more where they are. Now, that's why I feel like the trap of social media kicked in, because you could have 50,000 followers, but they're all over the country of 350 million people. So it's really kind of a speck in every area, maybe not as strong as where you are as you
Right.
think, because you see that number. And now people themselves get kind of turned off, and they go, well, I'm affecting all these people over here. So when you see it out in your front door, well, somebody else will get that because I'm working over here. I'm
Right.
busy, keeping my 56,000 followers held up, and yeah, we got to get back to just local. We got to get back to the homestead, if you will. Like if some of these, Trump's fighting the bigger battle up front. There's so many little skirmishes where we are, whether it's Idaho, Tennessee, or even back in California, where people need to just hunker down there and let Trump worry about. Because trust me, Trump has enough. He's going to jail. Him and his family, and they're going to lose all their stuff if they lose. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's only about stuff, but their legacy, their name, right? Like this is not just an election for him as well. So I think if people just get to a point of let's focus at home, because at home is going to be, you're going to be more effective. You're
That's right.
going to, be able to safeguard your surroundings and not have to stretch yourself so thin by getting caught up all in the national media. Like get yourself closer to home, guys, and get those 50% of Christians that still think it's okay to kill a baby. Like that's where you should be, and I think we
Yeah.
go a long way.
Yeah, speaking of Christians, and I think this includes just the people who can't stomach voting for Trump, but also just the apathy, just the apathetic people who abdicate any sort of leadership or any sort of political involvement, who don't think who think it's beneath them.
Yeah,
But half of Christians don't vote. Like they do not show up at the polls, and we're talking about eligible
yeah,
voters. Half of them do not. Which, boy, if just half of those voted, we would never lose another election. And it's so sad to see that they have completely bowed
I
out
know.
of what leadership we could have as a Christian
Mhm.
community over our government. And yeah, it's bizarre to watch. It's painful to watch. I mean, it's great, wickedness as far as I'm concerned, for you to just not take responsibility for our communities. And it's wicked. Now, on to some good news.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk a little bit about the polling. We have seen, Kamala Harris, like in the betting markets and some of those, and the betting markets are pretty incredible the way that they do this. She's taken a dive, especially after that 60-minute interview, because she got exposed, right? She's just not good.
She's
She
not talented, man. She's not
she
talented.
she's not a talented politician in that way. She's a
No.
talented schemer, and she
No.
schemed her way into the positions that she got. She, in some cases, she, slept her way into some of these things. So in that regard, I mean, she's ambitious and she's been able to do this, but she's not a talented politician otherwise. She doesn't have a slick and smooth way of communicating. She has her endless weird communist mantras and her nervous cackle, and all those things that have made her a untenable candidate up until she was picked from just a DEI standpoint. But we're seeing her, dropping, pretty quickly, and I think the bloom is off her rose.
Yeah, yeah, you're 100% right, man. Like the honeymoon is over. The machine, at least with Joe. Joe had a track record of. I mean, he had a track record of winning in a certain way that people could have at least stomached, right? Like people could say, "Oh, that makes sense." So then the media machine was able to wrap themselves around Joe in such a way where they could sell you him completely.
Right.
I, a mix between God's timing is the greatest timing of when Joe got knocked out the 2.5 weeks before the Democratic convention where they had to rush their decision of what they could or couldn't do. They had $100 and something million on one end that they couldn't just give to anyone else. So they're like, well, we need to get that in there so we can't completely overstep her. They knew who she was. Like
Yeah.
we're not the first ones. We know there's rumors about her staff turnover since she
Oh,
got in
yeah,
there. She's been
she's
the highest ever.
ridiculously, inadequate as a leader, and sounds like she's painful as a manager.
Yep.
So, that's always evidence. If